Welcome to part three of our debate. Hopefully, someone somewhere will give us the honor of giving a supercut of all this, put it together for us, because I ain't gonna do it.
I
Today,
might.
uh, hmm. Today we have a different opening, or right now we have a different opening. We've been going straight through, by the way, so just to let you know, we have been. We're already kind of loopy, and we're already really into it. We are now going to be talking about whether or not atheism is based on evidence. Now, I did the first two openings. Now it is time for Bad-Tempered Badger to take the defensive. So he will start off with the opening statement, and I will shut up. So please enjoy Bad-Tempered Badger's defense of atheism. All atheists blame him if he gets it wrong.
Right then. Is atheism based on evidence? Firstly, what is atheism? An ideology? No. A religion? No again. A claim to know for certain that there's no God? Still no. Atheism is a rejection of the claim that there is a God. It is the default position of disbelief until evidence is presented. Atheism is a claim, in the same way not playing golf is a sport. As it is not a positive claim, but the rejection of one, it is not based on positive evidence, but the lack of evidence for the claim it rejects. Proponents of various forms of theism have made the claim that their position is true and accurate. Atheists have seen those claims, seen their lack of rational basis, and rejected them as most likely false. This is often looked upon by theists as a cop-out. You just avoid the burden of proof so you don't have to argue, I hear them shout. This is at least in part true. In past decades, the godly have tried to argue as if there is a 50-50 split of credibility, that theism and atheism are on equal footing in terms of position and evidence. Because of this, atheists often revert to the definition of disbelief. I am not making a claim, so the evidence is not mine to provide. This is useful in establishing a basis, but less than helpful when trying to convince someone else, as it gives them nothing to work with and examine. So let's for a moment ignore the burden of proof and look at some of the reasons atheists do not believe. Absence of evidence is evidence of absence. It's a commonly stated title. The evidence presented by most religions for the truth of their claims is either false, misinterpreted, or so weak that it is unconvincing. In conversation, the usual suspects tend to recur. The universe proves God. Consciousness proves God. Miracles prove God. The resurrection proves God. The physical laws of the universe prove God. And on, none more sensible sounding to the non-believer than the last. These answers are given as the best evidence for God, but if evaluated by a scientific, legal, or simply skeptical standard, they are hearsay at best and less than nothing at worst. It is interesting to observe how, throughout the history of religion, the physical distance between God and his supposed creation has increased. There was a time when God was thought to be just behind the clouds, peeking out to throw fire and brimstone at non-believers. As our understanding has progressed, God has receded past the atmosphere to other planets, distant galaxies, and finally to a non-falsifiable, extra-universal concept. This mirrors the credibility of evidence for God's existence. As scientific understanding has expanded, the supernatural has shrunk back into the shadows, clinging to any small hole in humanity's knowledge in a God of the Gaps strategy. This does not point towards divine inspiration, but shows a society clinging to an ancient, outdated belief, trying desperately to make it fit with an ever-changing understanding of reality. Another oft-cited example is the arbitrary nature of which faith someone is born into. If religions were based on clear evidence, we would expect to find some consistency between them in what is believed. What we find is that different world religions are based on the cultural traditions and moral values of their societies, often in irreconcilable contradiction to one another. The specifics of a person's religion depend mostly on where they were raised, not on evidence and truth. And while they clearly cannot all be right, they can all be wrong. The final reason I will put here is quite simple: honesty. Considering the lack of credible evidence for the existence of a divine creator, the preponderance of evidence contradicting that hypothesis, the location of the burden of proof becomes clear. I am an atheist because I do not know the origin of the universe, and I don't claim to. There is no shame in admitting to not knowing something, but in my view, there is in clinging to a fairy tale. I am an atheist because I look at ancient religious stories and say, I don't know what caused all this, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't that. That's my statement.
All right. Well, I guess I'm up. I would like to thank Badtempered Badger for his elegant defense of atheism. But I would also like to warn, before I begin, that his argument for atheism is my argument against it. So let us begin. Is atheism based on evidence? Atheism is not based on evidence, but on a literal lack of faith. At the end of the day, atheism is a lack of belief. You do not need to go far to prove this, as in the comments to my own YouTube video and in Badtempered Badger's own statements to me just now. I have dozens of atheists who tell me this is so, including my friend who's debating me today. Atheism is the belief that gods do not exist, or a complete rejection of theism. It can be divided into two ways of expression: implicit or explicit. Implicit atheism is simply the absence of a belief in one or more gods, while explicit atheism is simply someone making a positive assertion regarding their lack of belief in gods. And so it goes down the line from strong to weak forms of atheism. Forms of atheism such as existentialism, objectivism, nihilism, structuralism, naturalism, skepticism, and nominalism are all simply denials of other forms of knowledge and types of truths they do not agree with. As for new atheism, it is not even a philosophy. It is simply a social and political movement led by men such as Dawkins, Hitchens, and Harris. The term atheism is an umbrella term which covers different phenomena. Let's begin with the three most popular forms of atheism: humanism, materialism, and the liberation types. Humanism is an ethical system and mode of thought where human interest and human dignity are the predominant drives. It considers humans to be the sole shapers and perceivers of history and philosophy. But all we need to do is look at the existence of dolphins and elephants to know that humans are not the sole perceivers of reality. While materialism preoccupied with objective matter and physical comforts, restricts concepts and ultimate reality to existing within time and space, rejecting spiritual and abstract theory. This philosophy lacks the ability to deal with unexplained phenomena and blatantly rejects evidence that contradicts its understanding of reality. In point of fact, atheism in general, as concerns religion, can be said to be a rejection of evidence, as atheists can be said to simply not care about their misrepresentations of God, religion, faith, and the history of moral and ethical development. Then there are the liberation atheisms, which view religion as a tool used by the powerful to control and enslave the weak. These are philosophies concerned with Marxism, socialism, and communism, and are more political in nature and are therefore based on opinion, not based on facts. So what are the other arguments for atheism? Well, according to Philosophy Basics, some atheists argue a lack of empirical evidence for the existence of deities as an argument for atheism. But the lack of evidence for one thing is not evidence for another. Others may argue that people cannot know God personally, and therefore they are unable to determine the existence of a God. Yet again, an argument from nothingness. Still others might make the claim that the flaws, limits, meaninglessness, and unintelligibility of language makes it impossible for anyone to know what anyone else means by the word God. And thus, even language becomes pointless. This is an absurdity. Some hold that the statement, "No God exists," is itself a belief about God, and that not expressing a proposition is proof of atheism. But I can say I don't like pistachio ice cream. That doesn't mean I secretly crave it. According to Philosophy Basics, there are metaphysical arguments for atheism as well. Physicalism explicitly denies the existence of non-physical beings. This would be an implicit denial of a particular concept of God. But neither believing nor disbelieving makes something so. Freud has argued that God and other religious beliefs are human inventions, created to fulfill various psychological and emotional wants and needs. But just as neither believing nor disbelieving makes something so, so too does neither believing nor disbelieving make something not. Then there are the arguments from logical atheism, a specific branch of atheism, that holds that the claims and ideas about a God or gods are inconsistent. But I can hold inconsistent beliefs about a chicken. That doesn't mean the chicken ceases to exist. Then there is the problem of evil, the difficulty of reconciling suffering in the world with the existence of a God. But again, the existence of something does not disprove the existence of something else. Therefore, atheism is based on a lack of evidence, not on evidence itself. And there you have my case. And you're up.
Yeah. Just tell me the last point you said again.
And therefore, atheism is based on a lack of evidence and not evidence itself.
The line before that.
I can hold
inconsistent
beliefs about a chicken. That doesn't mean a chicken ceases to exist. Then there's the problem of evil, the difficulty of reconciling suffering in the world with the existence of a God. But again, the existence of something does not disprove the existence of something else. I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Let me You get in position here. Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Ivy, for that eloquently put statement. Now let me respond. You say atheism is a literal lack of faith and belief. And that I would agree. You say it is a denial of other forms of knowledge and other kinds of truth, such as metaphysical or spiritual truth. I say it's not necessarily that. It is a disbelief in the specific example of metaphysical, of a metaphysical claim that there is a divine entity. It is a disbelief that spirituality is based on an external influencing entity and not the internal emotions and thoughts of humanity. You mentioned humanism, that humans are the sole perceivers of reality. Your counter was elephants and dolphins, and by extension primates, gorillas, possibly even ravens, or some other forms of intelligent animal, are other perceivers of reality, and therefore should have their own voice in the definition of history. I would to an extent agree, and in some countries, dolphins are recognized as non-human people. It is not incompatible with atheism to believe that other creatures are intelligent enough to be conscious. You mentioned materialism. Only physical. There is no spiritual or abstract realm. This is often linked to atheism, but isn't atheism itself. It is necessary to be an atheist to be a materialist, but it isn't necessary to be a materialist to be an atheist. There are atheists who believe that there are spiritual, non-corporeal creatures, but do not call them gods. They still meet the definition of atheist, as they do not believe in a god or gods. I would still call those people probably wrong, as would probably most atheists, but they still meet the basic definition. Lack of evidence is not evidence of absence, you say. But with no evidence, why believe? There's nothing to show a divine entity is there. It's based on ancient stories. Why continue to follow them? You mention the materialistic view of the world, often linked to atheism, makes dictionaries useless, as no word has a definite definition, and the concepts held within are not definitive. I'd argue, yes, that's correct. And in fact, dictionaries are changed to take into account current usages of words. For example, I did a little research into dictionaries. An old dictionary I have in another room has the definition of atheism that you use. A belief, a positive belief, that there is no God. But when I looked up the same dictionary online with the current usages of the word, the definition had changed to a disbelief, not an active belief. The dictionary, incidentally, was the Oxford English Dictionary. Definitions change based on current trends. Believing or disbelieving doesn't make something so. I'd agree. Inconsistent beliefs do not disprove, but they do show we don't understand something and that we should reassess based on the evidence available. The problem of evil is a debate of qualities of an object, not the existence of an object, so I would agree is irrelevant to this topic. What we must do is judge something's existence based on the evidence for it, not on stories which we have other explanations for.
You're going to have to stop there.
That's the end of my statement.
Thank you, Badtempered Badger. That was good. Now it's your turn to just suck it up as I dismantle your argument. So, I hope you enjoy it, because I loved it when I had to do it for the first two. Alright, so here we go. Badtempered Badger. The person representing, or the badger representing atheism today. And I know not all atheists represent all other atheists, but he is our representative today. And he admits that atheism is a rejection of evidence. He agrees that it is a weak stance to hold on to that form of atheism. I could stop there, but I won't. He says, well, what is the best argument for God? He says there are no proofs of God outside of the realm of speculation. Well, there are ontological proofs. There are formulas in philosophy, mathematical formulas, the same formulas that are used to prove physics, that are used to prove the distance of stars and the sun, that can be used to prove God. Now, I will not lie. You can use the same formulas to disprove it. I'm not going to take a one-sided approach here. But there are literal mathematical proofs of the existence of a God, or at least proofs of a supreme being. Now, does that supreme being have to be called God? No, he's correct. You can think that there are other forces at work and you don't have to call them God. I do. Most religious people do. Most religious people call it a singular God. Now, this force can be inside reality or outside reality. And that is, of course, an issue that has to do with personal belief. Do you believe there is something beyond the existence that you know? I personally do. But he then argues, okay, so we can accept that there are some proofs of something beyond us. But these proofs become known. And once they are known, they're no longer supernatural. I ask why. Why is it no longer supernatural? Because we understand how it works? Understanding how it works doesn't take away the majesty of it working. Is dissecting a frog, does that make it no longer a living creature of all the other frogs? No, it's that one frog is dead. We now know how the frogs work and function. That doesn't negate the existence of all other frogs. Did learning biology make human beings any less interesting, any less noble, any less capable of doing things greater than themselves? It did not. He says, well, what is the best argument for the correct beliefs? Well, one can be true. One can be a rejection of negatives, of meta-narratives. So let's see. There has to only be one truth, but there are no meta-narratives. That is a lie by simple fact that we know there are meta-narratives. We know mathematically that we can figure out patterns on random plants. We can figure out which plant is going to have a different color or have a mutation. That's a meta-narrative. Individually, you don't know that. You don't know which one it's going to be. But mathematically, you know that eventually there will be a difference. Those are meta-narratives, whether in narration, whether in mathematics, whether in existence. Meta-narratives are real, and they're how we do our theoretical sciences. Now, he says, but all that does Even if I prove that, which I just did, all that proves is an internal spirituality. And I would argue that the internal is the external. The universe in you mirrors the universe around you, and that the reality beyond it. Mirrors, imitates. Now, I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying it mirrors. He discounts materialism, and I thank him. And he admits that there is inconsistent beliefs in atheism. And again, I thank him. But what of my point of view? What is the value of such things? There are testimonies from many people, including myself, of us once being cruel or vicious, and us finding religion and these ancient beliefs and becoming better people. I would go on, but that is my time. All right, that's it. You want to do the closing?
Bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah?
No.
Well, you're ugly.
You got to do the
Very
closing
quick.
because you did because I did the open. You got to do the close for this chapter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ivy, for your comments. Certainly like to discuss them at another time. That's it for this discussion and this debate.
We got one more
One
more video.
You can find our other videos and the next one. The things I forgot where I was going with that line.
On
Let's
both
start
our
that
channels.
whole thing again.
On both our channels. We're going to put hosting on both our channels.
Let's just start again. I've cocked that whole thing up. Thank you, Mr. Ivy. That was a very interesting point of view. I'd like to discuss it with you another time. That's it for that discussion. Our other debates will be available on both our channels. Please subscribe to Mr. Ivy and to me, of course. I'm getting a bit fed up with the Catholic channel beating me on subscribers. Our next debate will be on the subject of, does man or God decide what qualifies as evil? Thanks for watching this one.